Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
The wife didn't come up with adequate lies that the husband believed for years, and this is what came out of it. Today's story with a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. Love and trust, two things that I thought for a long time I could never achieve in my life. I was an innocent boy, untouched by the dirt that life sometimes throws at you. When the incident that started it all happened, there's a line from Charles Dickens' classic that best describes my childhood. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Forget my parents. If it weren't for my grandmother and my best friend in the world, Jeremy, I would never have even left elementary school, much less graduated from college. It took 20 years before I could finally look in the mirror every morning and not think about what it took to get to this point. Nightmares have practically disappeared. What about anger? Well, that's under control too. Unfortunately, however, there was a price to pay. We buried my grandmother just before my 24th birthday, a loss that I still feel. Jeremy and his wife Cindy continue to be there when I need advice, which fortunately isn't often. Regina, the love of my life, says that she understands how I feel because she, like me, has faced problems in her life but always had the support of a loving and caring family, which I did not have. So I smile, kiss her, and thank her for being in my life. 3 days before my 5th birthday, my mom left my dad and me. Remembering that day, the first thing that comes to mind is the volume, louder than usual, in our house. I couldn't hear what they were arguing about, and at 5 years old, I probably wouldn't have understood anyway. However, when I heard glass breaking along with screams, I walked from our living room, where I was trying to watch TV, to the doorway leading to the kitchen. My mother was throwing everything out of the cabinets and onto the floor, all the while screaming at my father, who was standing less than 5 feet away from her on the other side of the countertop, screaming back. I was scared. This feeling came over me, and all I could think about was how adults don't act like that, or shouldn't, right? I must have started crying because I heard my dad yell at my mom, "Look what you're doing. You're scaring the hell out of your own son." I remember how he came over, picked me up, kissed me, and hugged me, carrying me out of the kitchen. He shouted over his shoulder to my mother. She shouted something back that would have made me wash my mouth out with soap and continued to throw everything around in the kitchen. He put me on the ground, telling me to go watch TV, but I wasn't going anywhere. They were back to their old ways. Names were thrown back and forth. When Mom stopped, I thought that was the end until next time. "I don't need this," she shouted, grabbing her coat and car keys. "I'm leaving and won't come back." "God forbid the door hits you on the 5th place on the way out," my dad quickly responded. But all I heard was my mom saying she was leaving us. I cried hysterically and ran after her out the kitchen door and into the garage. "Mommy! Mommy!" I shouted, following closely behind her. "Go back to the house," was all she said to me, but I wasn't about to let her leave. She literally ran to her car parked in the driveway. When I caught up with her, tears were streaming down my cheeks as I tried to grab her. "Go back to the house, do you hear?" I tried to reach her, grabbing everything I could. With both hands around her waist, I thought I had stopped her from leaving. She released my small hands. "Stephen Joseph, I told you to go back to the house now." I tried to reach her again, and that's when it happened. Whether she wanted it or not, she did it anyway, and it remains in my memory to this day. I immediately felt the burning and heat from the slap, and time stopped for me. My mother had never slapped me before. Hell, she had never even spanked me. I was shocked. I just stood and looked into her tear-stained eyes. Something died in me that day. Until this moment, I was innocent and untouched, and now I would be marked for the rest of my life. "Get away from him," my father shouted. He grabbed me and carried me back to the house, but even that step didn't stop my little brain from trying to figure out how my mother could do this to me. I thought she loved me. I didn't cry anymore, I was speechless. Dad sat me down on the sofa and looked out the front window, watching my mom drive away. The neighbors who were home at the time put on quite a show that day, and they still talk about that little display in our driveway. The next 24 to 48 hours passed in a blur. My grandmother came, and a plan was made regarding the who, what, where, when, and why of my meager existence. From that day on, my grandmother was there every morning when I woke up and stayed with me until my dad returned from work. As for my loving mother, well, that became my problem after my father and his family washed their hands of it. Almost a month passed before I saw my mother again. My grandmother took me to her parents' house, and I had to spend all of Saturday and most of Sunday with her. Loving and caring, that's what she was that weekend. Nothing was said about what she did the day she left, and all I really cared about was being with her again. As soon as I get settled, you'll move in with me, she promised over and over. At 5 years old, I had no reason not to believe her. But no matter how many times she said it, it never happened. Her weekly visits became once every 2 weeks, then once a month, and finally, it felt like I only saw her on holidays and special occasions, especially as I got older. I think it all came to a head when I was dropped off at my grandparents' house one Friday after school, and she didn't come to see me once that entire weekend. Her parents, my grandparents, always made sure I was busy, but I didn't want that. I needed my mother. "But honey, your mom had to work this weekend," they told me. "She has an important job, and you should be proud of her." I didn't care about her important job, I just wanted her. I guess I just wasn't important enough. After that weekend, if my mother wanted to see me, my father would force her to pick me up at our house. She said she loved me only when I saw her, and there was always some man with her. I think I was 13 when she came to pick me up one Friday night, taking her other boyfriend with her. I looked at her and closed the door. After that, I never spent weekends with her again. She called and texted, but that's all it was. In her eyes, I was no longer important. I was replaced by someone else in her life. Eventually, I realized that I no longer wanted to be another liability for her. Children can be mean, especially if you are not part of their special group or clique. At first, it was just questions about why I didn't have a mother. I would tell them that I had a mother, she just didn't live with us anymore. Later came ridicule, name-calling, and finally pushing and shoving. I don't know how many times I came home from school crying. My grandmother was always by my side, kissing and hugging me. As I got older, it didn't help me get rid of the cuts, bruises, and hurt feelings. After a particularly bad day at school, I came home with a black eye. A boy at school said that his father told him my mother was a expletive, and that my father kicked her out because of it. We repeated it's not like that, it's like that probably a dozen or more times before I finally pushed him. Then he and his two buddies started beating the crap out of me. If it weren't for Jeremy, I don't know what would have happened. He came up behind them and pulled them away from me. 2 against 3, we fought a pretty good fight, but we got the worst of it. It's hard not to since they were older and bigger than us. After that day, Jeremy and I became inseparable. When my father saw me, he was furious. He looked at my face and turned red with rage. "Who did this to you?" "A couple of older boys," was my answer, looking at the floor and then into his eyes, embarrassed. "How many were there?" When I told him the whole story, including what Jeremy had done, he sat me down on the ottoman in front of his chair. "Steve, life sucks most of the time. If you are not willing to fight for what you want, there will always be someone who will try to take it away from you. You'll never be a fighter, you're too small. But that doesn't mean you have to give in to them. It just means you have to be smarter and be willing to do whatever it takes to win. Understand?" I didn't understand at the time, but I was soon to learn what an equalizer was. It was 8 inches long and had a leather strap that I could put my hand through. It was the handle from my old wooden baseball bat. Now this was my balance. Don't look for a fight, but if one happens, don't run away. If they see you're not letting yourself be bullied anymore, they'll stop. And if they don't, make them pay until they stop. My grandmother was not happy and told my father that scripture says to turn the other cheek. "Ma, the only thing this does is give them another place to strike." The sooner he realizes that nothing in this world is free, the better off you will be. Dad showed me how to use it, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to go to school. 3 days later, Jeremy and I were walking home from school when the group that attacked us, plus one other, stopped us. "Your mom is an easy girl, and your dad is a coward," said the big guy in front with a stupid grin on his face. I remembered what my father had said about trying to avoid a fight, so we tried to get around them. Did you hear what I said? Your dad is a coward, so I guess you are too, he shouted, laughing. He grabbed me from behind and pulled me to the ground. I was able to take it out of my backpack, put my hand through the leather strap, and wait. I was just starting to get to my feet when he tried to hit me. With my balance and the handle in my right hand, I swung and hit him in the lower left leg. His screams were music to my ears. I swung again and hit him in the upper left arm. Now he was the one who found himself on the ground, sobbing like a small child. With newfound courage, I turned and looked at the stunned group. I saw fear in their eyes and watched as they all took a step back. I turned and looked at my attacker. If I hear one more word from you about my mom or dad, or if you touch me again, I will break one of your arms. Understand? I hit his arm again when he didn't respond. This caught his attention. Okay, was all he said, looking up at me. Jeremy and I walked through the group. Although I was still terrified, I felt good. My heart was beating like crazy, and I was drenched in sweat, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a victim. When I told my grandmother, she lectured me, saying, "Violence doesn't solve anything. If you had just walked away, they'd leave you alone." I loved my grandmother to death, but she was from a time when people were kinder. This was no longer the case. All my father did was smile when I told him. He warned me against overconfidence, saying that perhaps they would leave me alone now. Although the fight did not occur on school grounds, 2 days later, my father and I, along with all the other parents and children, were called to the principal's office for a meeting. My father told me not to say anything while we listened to the parents of the boy I hit. They talked a lot about how much pain Timmy was in and how I could have broken his arm and ruined his chances of getting a baseball scholarship. Other parents also said their children were deeply traumatized by the violence they witnessed. Everything was not going in my favor. When my father stood up and started to leave, the principal asked where he was going. After listening to all this nonsense for the last 20 minutes, "I think I need some fresh air," my father said. "Mr. Dumore, you don't seem to be taking this matter very seriously," the principal said as he stood up to face my father. "A bad move. But I am serious. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made this baton for my son and taught him how to use it. Maybe the next time 4 bullies decide to attack one little boy, they'll think twice about what could happen." My father reached out to the parents of the boy who originally attacked me. "But honestly, I wish he'd actually broken your son's arm. Then he'd understand what it's like to be attacked day after day. And if you're interested, I have a witness who can tell you what they started." My son was only defending himself. The room was now quite quiet. "As I see it, we have 2 options. 1, you can give each of these little rascals a detention for being a total pain in the 5th place, or I can contact the school board and let them know that our school's principal openly allows his students to be bullied." My father turned to the principal. "The choice is yours." With the principal now stuttering, my father grabbed my hand, and we began to walk away, holding our heads high. Right before we left, he turned to the father of the boy I hit. "Oh, by the way, I knew your wife when she was in high school, and she was one of the most famous girls available. So I guess that makes you a coward." My father smiled. He didn't wait for the answer he knew would never come. Instead, we just walked out. I love my father. I wish I could say that growing up, my father was always there for me, but why lie? He gave me everything I needed physically, but he didn't give me what the 2 women in my life gave me, love and warmth. It was important to him to be strong and tough and never show his vulnerability because it was a sign of weakness. Real men are not weak, that's what he instilled in me. My grandmother became my surrogate mother and always tried her best for me. She made me feel loved and wanted and tried to teach me how to treat others, especially members of the opposite night. Although my father occasionally dated women, he did so in such a way as to never expose them to me. He always made sure I was in bed if he brought someone home. Sometimes I heard my father and his date in his bedroom, but I never said a word about it. There was to be no talk of the birds and the bees in front of him. He just assumed I knew or would have picked it up on the street like he probably did. However, when I was old enough to date, he told me that if I even thought about doing this to a girl without protection, he and I would have a heart-to-heart, and I wouldn't like it very much. 3 days later, I found a box of protections on my bed. I guess he wasn't taking any chances. Your dad is so cool, my best friend Jeremy said. My father would never do this for me. I gave him half the box because at the time I wasn't even dating, and he was. Jeremy and I have been best friends ever since. He helped me ward off those bullies. After school one day, we were in the same class, but usually not in the same class. We lived a couple of blocks from each other, and after school, we would meet at either my house or his. My grandmother called him her adopted son, and his parents liked me so much that I was always invited to open dinners. They knew about my mom and dad, but they never brought it up. When we started high school, Jeremy played football, and I ran cross country and played soccer. We were still thick as thieves, even when we started dating. It seemed like we continued to put each other first, well, Jeremy did, until his senior year when he met Cindy. He fell so hard and fast that I told him he would need a shovel to dig himself out. He was so in love with her. She wasn't the prettiest girl in the class, but you'd never know it from the way he talked about her. I wished I had such a person. I've had my share of dates, I've just never found one as special as him. Most of the girls I dated were easygoing and thought of themselves as God's gift to men, or in my case, boys. When a couple of them were playing games with me, I called them out on it. If they didn't want to date me, all they had to do was say so instead of lying to me, because I always found out. Guys, unlike girls, weren't good at keeping dating secrets and usually bragged about it the next day. I assumed I could have been a little more gentle with them, but lying and trust were huge issues for me. In college, I felt like I fell in love not once but twice. Debbie was great, we merged in different ways. Then I found out that she wanted to travel the world, and children were not on her radar. Our relationship did not last long. After 6 months of dating, I introduced Rosemary to my family. Everyone thought we were made for each other, even me, until I caught her in a lie, and a big one at that. We had a bit of a rocky start. She was dating a guy named Kenny. The relationship had run its course, and she tried to break it off with him. We talked, went to a couple of movies, and I even went out to dinner a few times, trying to convince her to leave him. Look, let me make this very clear, I told her over dinner one night. I really like you, but I'm a lonely man. I don't share with anyone. If you want to date me, it must be on an exclusive basis. I don't want to have to wonder what you're doing when we're not together. I thought I explained this quite clearly, but apparently not. I still don't know how many times she lied to me. The problem was not the quantity but the fact that she did it at all. This was a big problem for me. I don't even know if she slept with anyone else, and looking back, I know she probably didn't. But once I realized she was lying to me, she was history. It was Friday evening. Rosemary said she was getting together with a few of her friends to hang out. No problem, this would give me a chance to catch up with a few of my friends whom I'd been neglecting lately. Friday nights were usually full of parties on and off campus. Even if you weren't of legal drinking age, alcohol could be purchased, and you didn't have to look too far, especially if you were a girl. The Brotherhood of Rats, that's what I called them, were frat boys whose main mission in life was to get girls drunk at parties just so they could have an intimate with them. Everyone knew what was going on at these parties, especially in the two most famous dorms that always had problems with the college and were usually on probation. I never went to their parties, although many of my friends did. As I said, this was a man's conversation. Guys have no loyalty, especially if they have a chance to get some casual night. One of my friends told me that Rosemary and 3 of her friends were at a frat party on Friday night. He said he wasn't sure if she was drunk, but she was definitely making out with one of the guys on the makeshift dance floor. Steve, I don't know how far they went, but they kissed pretty passionately for at least 6 songs. I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but I think you should know. I was furious. Even if she was drunk, she shouldn't have kissed anyone but me. That weekend, I was waiting for her to call me. I had no intention of calling her. Finally, on Sunday morning, she called. "Where were you?" "You didn't call," she said. I interrupted her. "Rosemary, I'm trying to figure out a problem I can't figure out." "I know I can help you figure it out," she laughed. "How was Friday night with your girlfriends? What did you end up doing?" I took her at her word and wanted to see what I could catch. We just stayed home with a few bottles of wine and talked all night, you know, girl talk. So you didn't even go out? I gave her one last chance to tell the truth. She didn't take it. No. After a couple of hours, neither of us was able to walk, let alone drive. I quickly ended the call. When I hung up, I really think Rosemary thought she had outsmarted me. Over the next week, her calls, text messages, and emails went unanswered. "Where are you and why don't you answer the phone?" she asked, probably a little irritated. This came to a head when she was waiting for me outside her accounting class. "Steve, what's going on with you lately? I can't reach you. Why are you talking to me like that? If I didn't know better, I'd think you were mad at me for some reason. Rosemary, I want you to think twice and tell me again what you did last Friday night." She saw that something was wrong. "You just hung out with a few girlfriends and had a couple of bottles of wine, right?" "Yes, like I said before." "So what you're saying is that Gary lied to me when he said he saw you and 3 of your girlfriends at the Alpha frat house on Friday night, and that you didn't dance or make out with any guy there at all. Is that it?" She started to get nervous. The look in her eyes said I was right. "Steve," she started, but I interrupted her. "If he is right, we would be finished completely, because you know my attitude toward lies. Thank God you are not that kind of woman and I can trust you unconditionally." Tears began to accumulate in her eyes as she realized she was caught. "I didn't say anything because I knew you'd be angry. They talked me into going. They forced me to stick my tongue down his throat. How far did you go that night? Did you give yourself to him?" Her tears were now flowing freely. I was over it and over her. Why do I keep meeting women like my damn mother? I have to go. I have class. With that, I left her life. I didn't respond to her emails, especially the ones where she tried to explain everything. It was just one time, and she was sorry. Me too, but it didn't matter. We were history. "Sorry, man," Jeremy said sympathetically as we had a couple of beers later that night. "I thought you and Rosemary were made for each other." "That's what I thought. I'm just glad I found out now and not 10 years later, like my father." "Let me ask you a question," I said, looking him straight in the eyes. "Has Cindy ever lied to you?" He looked at me strangely. "You know, I don't remember. And besides, even if she lied, it would have to be very serious for me to leave her, like you left Rosemary." "Well, then can you give me advice?" "I can't find a good one, but you found it the first time. With your luck, you can always find another one. Even if I said yes, I'm not going to. Cindy would never go for it. She thinks you're too strict and expect too much from people." I couldn't believe what I just heard. She just thinks you expect too much from people? Steve, everyone lies, even if it's little white lies so they don't hurt someone's feelings. And don't talk to me because I've heard you lie too. These aren't the lies I'm talking about. The lies I take to heart are about relationships. If Rosemary were your girlfriend, what would you do? She outright lied to me. She seriously kissed another guy. I gave her a chance to get out of jail not once, but twice, and she still lied to my face. Steve, I think she was ashamed of what she had done and perhaps thought that if she could get out this time, she would never be in that situation again. The problem is you don't forgive and forget. Everything is black or white. I had 2 great teachers. You can't blame your parents forever. People get divorced all the time. So your mom cheated on your dad. Not every woman cheats. I knew he was right, I just hadn't met the right girl yet. And since he wasn't going to give me Cindy, I'd have to find a good one on my own. They say the first week after graduating from college is one of the best weeks of your life. There are no more papers to write or tests to study for. You can relax and enjoy your free time, and that's exactly what I did. I had 2 job offers and an interview on Thursday morning. My life moved forward, lonely, but still forward. That's when it happened. The evening rush hour was moving slower than usual, and I was kicking myself for getting out on the road for no particular reason. The car behind me was constantly trying to get out of traffic, desperately trying to get one car ahead. I looked at him in the rearview mirror, shook my head, and turned up the volume on the radio. As we slowly moved forward, He must have seen an opening ahead and slammed on the gas, trying to get ahead while everyone else stopped again, everyone except him. He slammed straight into the left rear of my car, pushing it into the car in front of me. What an idiot, I thought, turning off the engine and getting out to assess the damage, knowing that now I wouldn't go anywhere. He cursed and yelled, saying it wasn't his fault and that I was an idiot for stopping right in front of him. I then walked to the front of my car to see what damage my car had done to the car in front of me. She was attractive, arrogant, and extremely loud. She got out of her car and started yelling at me, using language worthy of a dock worker. The driver of the car that hit me crawled back into his car before she could see him. There was something along the lines of Jesus Christ, son of a, and a bunch of other nonsense mixed with a dozen foreign words uttered by what seemed to be a high-strung Latina. Damn, I just made the last payment on my car and you ran into it. Son of a, do you even have a driver's license? And if you do, did you win it in a box of crackers? She shouted. When I didn't answer or say a word, she wanted to know what I was going to do about her car. I wasn't quite sure how to answer at first. I was just glad she wasn't hurt. Look, I'm sorry I crashed into you, but the guy in the Mustang behind me crashed into me and pushed me into you. I'm just glad everything's okay. Well, it's not okay because he couldn't wait 10 seconds for the light to change. I'm going to be late picking up my daughter from daycare. She went on a tirade as she stood there in a light blue sundress with her arms crossed. Her eyes burned 1,000 holes into the other guy as he sank lower in the front seat, trying to hide from her. Look, I said, even when the cops come, which could be in 20 minutes or an hour, all they'll do is take statements from everyone and make sure we exchanged insurance information. Why don't we exchange driver's license numbers, telephone numbers, and insurance numbers, and we can all leave? She looked at her watch, burned a couple more holes in that guy's head with her gaze, and said, okay. I took out a notepad and started writing. The idiot didn't have his insurance card on him, but we got the rest of his information. When he started talking to Regina, that was the woman's name, apologizing to her, he made the mistake of looking at her breasts, which were not small and were all in plain sight. Hey, my eyes are up here, not down there, she blurted, getting in his face. I realized that Regina was ready to explode. Why don't we all calm down and get this over with so we can leave? I turned to look at her. Don't worry, he's 100% at fault. His insurance company will pay. Our insurance companies will pay my deductible for repairing my car. You probably will have to, but you should get it back from his insurance company or mine. I gave her all my information, telling her I hoped her insurance company would take care of her. No, I prayed that they would take care of her. This was one lady I wouldn't want to deal with. Don't worry. If they don't make it, the rest will be taken out of that guy's 5th place, she said, burning another hole in the center of his forehead just in case. I felt bad for the poor guy. If his insurance company couldn't handle it, I wasn't sure if mine would cope, considering the accident wasn't my fault, and I definitely didn't want to deal with that wildcat. Within 25 minutes of the accident, we each had everything we needed, to the delight of all the cars trying to pass us. Meanwhile, the police arrived, giving each of us a form to fill out for the accident report. When they found out the guy in the Mustang didn't have his insurance information on him, he was fined. It felt like hours, but was actually about 45 minutes, before I finally headed home. I had 2 interviews the following week and scheduled a 3rd for the following Monday. The job I really wanted offered a lower salary than the other 2 but provided more opportunities for advancement. I was tasked with coordinating the engineering, purchasing, and manufacturing departments to ensure that schedules were met on time and that necessary changes were made to projects to avoid delays. It could be quite stressful at times. I can guarantee you won't be bored, the interviewer warned and encouraged me. This sounded exactly like what I was looking for. A few weeks after my 2nd and 3rd interviews, I accepted the offer and was ready to start working. Life was pretty good right now. My insurance company told me that the guy who hit me didn't have insurance. The damage to my car would be repaired under my policy. I knew I wouldn't get my deductible back. I called the idiot. He said he was fired a few weeks ago and was broke, adding that as soon as he found another job, he would make things right. Yeah, of course, when pigs fly, I thought. I should have expected the call, but I didn't. However, when I answered the phone, I immediately knew who it was. "This scoundrel doesn't even have insurance, let alone a job," were the first words out of her mouth. "He said he'd pay me." Yeah, what a lie. I can't hold my breath. "I'll probably have to get it from your insurance company." "Good evening, Regina," I began, trying to start our conversation on a positive note. "I've already sent in my accident report and everything. If you want, I'll be happy to give you my agent's name and number. Give me your name and phone number just in case I run into problems. My car is already being repaired, so I need to get this over with once and for all." I gave her everything she asked for. "I hope everything goes well for you," I said optimistically. "Don't worry, it will be." She hung up. I wondered if I'd have to find a new insurance agent after she talked to him, regretting the next call my agent was about to receive. 2 weeks after Regina's call, Jeremy, Cindy, and I went out to celebrate my new job. This was a big step for me. I was looking forward to moving into my own place and finally getting out from under my father's wing. We had dinner at a nice Mexican restaurant. After eating, we went to one of the new dance clubs. To be honest, I don't really know how to dance. I try to move my legs, my arms, and try not to look like a complete idiot on the dance floor. Personally, I like it when it's dark and crowded. After a couple of beers, we had just finished our first round of drinks when we were lucky enough to snag a table from a group that was leaving. Considering how crowded it was, the tables were worth their weight in gold. The club was nice, the music sounded great, and I was actually having fun when, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone walking towards our table. "Damn," was all I could say before she was on top of me. "Steve, your insurance company worked." "Thank God," Regina began, not bothering with a greeting or any introduction. "I'd still like to take a big damn hammer and smash that guy in his shitty car." Jeremy and Cindy sat with their mouths open as they listened to Regina's tirade. "Regina, this is my best friend Jeremy and his girlfriend Cindy," I said, trying to change the subject. "Want to join us for drinks?" She looked over her shoulder at the group she had just left with and nodded. "I guess one drink won't hurt. What can I bring you?" "Surprise me," she said, grinning from ear to ear, which was easy for her considering she didn't have a small mouth. I grabbed Jeremy, and we headed to the bar. "Is that the girl you bumped into?" Jeremy asked. "She seems cute, but what a mouth she has." I thought Cindy would choke on her drink. We both laughed at this. Regina was not a little girl by any means. She could look me straight in the eyes, which must have made her about 5 feet 8 inches in stockings. She had huge breasts and a fifth place that could rival any black girl. She wasn't fat, but she wasn't thin either. I would guess her weight was between 150 and 165 pounds. She, my friend, was not created for speed but for comfort. She had great breasts, and the way they held up in that dress was an architectural marvel. Jeremy was on the verge of salivating. We returned to the table with drinks in hand. I gave Jeremy some advice. "Unless you want to die a horrible death, don't look at her breasts. I can tell you from experience that she doesn't like it." We looked at each other and laughed before reaching our table. "Here you go, ladies," we handed out drinks. Regina looked at hers and then at me. "Why do you think I drink red wine now?" I find myself in a quandary. "Well, you don't seem like a white wine drinker. Although sometimes I think you prefer something stronger, for a casual evening out so you don't get drunk, a light red wine is something you might like," he replied. I told her, then took a sip of my Corona. "Not bad, not bad." We touched glasses. "Where's your girlfriend?" Regina looked around. "No girl, just the 3 of us celebrating my new job." "Are you after men?" The beer coming out of my nose stung like hell, and the subsequent cough wasn't fun either. "No, what kind of nonsense are you talking about?" I was still coming to my senses. "Well, you're a nice guy, and if you don't have a girlfriend, I just assumed you must be into men. You know, that's the trend these days, isn't it?" "No, I don't like men if you're wondering. I like women. I just don't have anyone right now." "Give it up, huh?" "No, I didn't. If you're wondering, I dumped her." Cindy was now trying her best not to laugh at our conversation. So you didn't want to, or are you just tired of her? Regina, why are you interested in this? I asked, trying to keep the conversation light. Just talking, I guess. I touched on some touchy subject, huh? She lied to me. That's why we're not together anymore. Satisfied, I guess. But it had to be something really serious for you to almost snap at me, huh? She just didn't stop. I looked to Cindy and Jeremy for help. Forget it. They used us for their evening entertainment. Lies and betrayal are two things I don't tolerate from anyone, I said, perhaps too loudly because several people around us were paying attention. I've been through this too, and it's not fun, but from what I see, most men are unreliable. They lie to you to get in your pants, and after they get it, they leave forever. Nonsense. Women are just as bad as men. They lie hoping they don't get caught, and if they do, they blink their eyes, wiggle their butts, maybe shed a few tears, then say they're sorry, thinking that's it, we'll fix it. But not in my book. They do it because it's been that way their whole lives. There's a double standard, and you know it. A woman who sleeps with a couple of men gets labeled as available, but when a man gets more than a couple of girls, he becomes a hero. Then when a man decides to get married, he wants an untouched virgin, not a girl who's walked around the block like him. This is complete nonsense. Don't girls play games? If a guy is handsome and has money, you girls fall at his feet just to meet him. But if he's an ordinary guy, say with a 10-year-old car, most women won't even give him time, let alone agree to meet him. Girls love to date bad guys and those who treat them badly, but when it comes time to settle down, they return to the solid, stable ones they never even noticed before, accountants, computer geeks, regular 9-to-5 workers, etc. Suddenly, they become very loving, telling them how they would like to meet them. All they are looking for now is a damn safety net because their bad guys are not for marriage and will not give them what this poor naive guy will give. Once they are established, if someone better is found, they will not hesitate to cheat on their husband because they know that he will probably forgive them. I was furious, my heart was beating like crazy, and I was lashing out at a girl I barely knew. Now everyone was really looking at me. Looks like someone really hurt your ego, Regina said, looking straight at me. You may be right about some women, but not all. Like you, I've been scammed a few times, so maybe I keep my guard up, but unlike you, I give people a chance before I jump on them. Regina stood up. Well, that was educational. I have to get back to my friends. Call me if you want to discuss this again. With these words, she returned to her group. Cindy and Jeremy just looked at me, and after she was out of earshot, they burst out laughing. What? Boy, this girl definitely knows your number, Cindy said. Smart, beautiful, and with a lot of baggage. If I were you, I'd marry her as soon as possible. Haha, am I one big joke now? I asked. Look, I didn't ask for any of this. People have been stepping on my feet and choking me my whole life, except for Grandma and Jeremy. Sorry if I have a few problems with trust. You would have too if you went through what I went through. But Steve, don't you see how this is stopping you from moving forward and becoming the person you can be? Cindy answered. Steve, I love you to death, but one day you're going to have to open up, let down your guard, and trust someone even if it hurts you. Life is too short for you to wonder every time you meet someone, what if? Take a risk once, and perhaps one day you will find what you were looking for. After a couple more drinks, we were ready to leave. Regina looked at me, waved goodbye, and we headed home. In the car, Cindy started pestering me again. Jeremy knew better than to keep his mouth shut, he wasn't stupid. Cindy hugged me goodbye, and I walked into my house with my mind too busy. I waited almost 2 weeks before calling her again. I still had her phone number from the accident and thought, what the hell? What do I have to lose? It was Tuesday, and I decided it was early enough to take her to dinner on Saturday. She had plans the next week, it was the same the following week. On the third week, I called on Monday. Guess what she said? I didn't call the next week, but lo and behold, who did I see on Saturday at the same club I was at a month ago? When she arrived, about an hour after I did, I was ready for what would happen next. Good evening, Steve, she began the conversation, but that was all she had time to say. What did you come for, a free drink or just to get into a puddle? I answered before she could say anything else. Because if that's the case, please find yourself another sucker. Damn, the words were literally pouring out of her mouth in both Spanish and English. She called me everything except the tall white guy. I don't even think she took a deep breath while she threw out her second portion of what I thought were insults at me. What really angered her was when I turned my back on her after telling her that I had better things to do than argue with a wayward woman. Few English words were spoken now as I watched her eyes turn red, her cheeks flush, and her voice rise to octaves. I was tired of her endless tirades. We started to attract a crowd, and I needed to finish it. Regina, if you didn't want to date me, all you had to say was that you don't date skinny white guys instead of telling me crap. I would have understood. Lying only confirms my theory that the only thing hot women care about is themselves. I'm done arguing. She left in a rage, and the crowd that had gathered around us soon dispersed. My friends Gary and Rick just stood there and looked at me. That was incredibly cool, Gary said, high-fiving me. I would never dare say that to any girl. I'm still shocked that she didn't punch you in the face or kick you between the legs or something like that. My ex-girlfriend probably would have punched me in the chest. Don't look back now, but there's one hot Latino woman coming at 10 o'clock, Rick warned, letting me know when she approached me. She made sure we were standing face to face before she started. FYI, I was really busy those days, and if you had called me this week, you would have found out that I would have agreed to go on a date with you. But now, that will never happen, she said, looking me straight in the eyes, not allowing me to look away. Besides, you will never be able to touch this hot figure, and that will be your loss. There was no chance I would leave this unanswered. I retorted, so tell me, what will you do when all your friends get bored of you and leave you alone in bed? Will you then wonder what it would be like if you met someone who wanted to be with you because of who you are, not what you can do for them? Her wide eyes said it all. I left that night feeling pretty good, knowing that this time it wasn't my fault. I was having dinner with my dad on Tuesday night when my cell phone rang. I looked at the number and wondered if I should answer. Dad, I need to answer, I told him as I walked out onto the patio. What do you want? I asked. Regina, she began, I want to call a truce. I'm listening. Listen, you don't know anything about me. If I said I was busy, I was busy. I'm not lying. And one more thing, I won't let anyone talk to me like that, okay? We started off on the wrong foot. If you want to try again, I'm ready. If not, like I said, it's your loss. You say that all the time, she replied. Well, you keep saying I'm hot. We both laughed at this. Okay, how about dinner on Saturday night? I can't, I'm busy. But you just said. I said I was busy on Saturday at the church market, but not on Friday. Okay, how about meeting on Friday night? It would be great to go on a date with you on Friday night. See, it wasn't that hard. We talked for another half hour, mostly about trifles, or as I like to call them, little things. She gave me her address and told me to pick her up around 7 o'clock. Be prepared, I still live at home with my parents, and you'll get more than one checkup. I think I can handle it. Steve, you don't know my family, she said. She was right. Why couldn't she be ready and wait for me so that we could leave as soon as possible? Her father greeted me at the door with a firm handshake. Looking inside, I saw two other large men leaning on the mantel in the living room. They were partially hidden by 8 women, all of whom were watching me as I walked in. What do I do for a living? Am I Catholic? Where do I live? And since I live with my dad, am I going to move? And finally, what do I think about children? I'm just glad they didn't ask if I had my own teeth or check them, because at that point, I would have screamed. I warned you, Regina said as we walked out to my car. I didn't think there would be so many people. My parents, my older brothers, my grandmother, and my aunts all asked questions when I told them who I was going to date. My family is very caring, but should your father have taken my fingerprints? We both laughed at this. We had a good date, though it was a little tense at times due to our brief, fiery history and more than a bit of luggage we were both lugging around. Her ex-boyfriend got her pregnant and ran away when he found out. As far as she knew, he had returned to Puerto Rico, where they both came from. Regina immediately told me that her 3-year-old daughter, Angela, always comes first. Steve, how do you feel about dating a woman with a 3-year-old child? You have to understand that there will be no sleepovers, and it will never be just the two of us. I will always need to think about Angela when we plan something. It can be difficult, and if you don't want to continue, I would understand. Let's see how it goes, day by day. I haven't been around kids much, so this will be a new experience for me, but I don't get scared that easily. They kicked us out of the restaurant at 11. As I was driving her home, she asked me to stop in a parking lot about a half-mile from her house. She kissed me so hard that the soles of my shoes melted. I sat there, looking surprised but pleased. Did you really think that I would let you kiss me standing at the door of my house or on the threshold in front of everyone? Besides, I wanted to see what you were capable of without pressure. Now drive, I need to get home before they send a search party after me. When we arrived at her house, I opened the car door for her, walked her to the front door, and was rewarded with a kiss on the lips. From the corner of my eye, I saw shadows moving from window to window inside the house. They can't be that protective, I thought to myself as I walked back to the car. She's not a child, she has a daughter, damn it. I waved goodbye to her before getting into the car and driving away. Okay, I knew it was stupid, and I probably would have been able to get away if someone in her family hadn't seen me driving past the church on Saturday night. They waved at me. I waved back, and then I felt my stomach clench. Damn, I said under my breath. Were you following me? Regina screamed into the phone. Her loud, harsh words echoed in my head. It's not what you think. I just wanted to see what you were doing. It sounded as stupid as if she had said, I was passing by. Then why didn't you come in? Would you believe that I felt a little intimidated by your family? It wasn't a lie, Steve. I come from a big, close Catholic family, and we all care and help each other. It's probably not that different from your family. She clearly didn't know what she was talking about. Regina, let's just say that my upbringing was different from yours and keep it to ourselves. Look, if I embarrassed you in any way, I sincerely apologize. You didn't disgrace me. I just think you have some serious trust issues that we'll have to deal with if I decide to date you again. I'm not going to lie to you, and the sooner you realize that, the better. However, I won't tolerate you following me or stalking me. Understand? So, if you want to act like a normal person, then we can meet again. If not, don't call me again. There was no doubt that she had laid all her cards on the table. Sorry, it won't happen again. How about I make it up to you this Saturday? You're free, right? You're lucky, there's nothing on my calendar yet. Great, sign me up. This time, the choice of restaurant is yours. I'm not a racist, really, but I felt more than uncomfortable in the restaurant that Regina chose. It was a nice place, the food was fantastic, but from the moment we walked through the front door, all eyes were on me as if I had come from another planet. I felt like I was at an exhibition. This is my favorite restaurant in the whole world. They make everything from scratch, and the portions are killer, she said. She was right about that because I couldn't even finish my plate. If I close my eyes and take a deep breath, I can imagine that I'm back home in Puerto Rico, in my grandmother's kitchen, sitting at her big wooden table. Regina smiled, but looking at several other tables, the guys there didn't look happy. You could say that I was trespassing on their territory. Then it began. It started with an innocent question. Unfortunately, my answer opened a chapter in my life that I had tried to keep closed. Steve, when you look back, what is your most vivid childhood memory? It was an innocent question, and I think she was expecting some cute story about my mom baking cookies for me, something sweet and innocent. But that's not what I said. Mom who slapped me in the face when I tried to stop her from leaving. Daddy and me, I said in a low monotone voice with an indifferent face. Well, that definitely wiped the smile off her face. What followed was a conversation I had only had with Jeremy and my grandmother. I tried not to let my anger take over, but my trembling voice became louder and louder. Regina finally thought it would be better if we continued this conversation somewhere else. I paid the bill, and we continued talking in the front seat of my car for the next 2 hours. It brought me back to my own personal hell. I didn't tell her everything. I only gave her enough highlights for her to understand why I am the way I am, including my closeness with Jeremy. Steve, not all women are like your mother. Some are, but most are not. And not all women are out to deceive you, believe me. I wanted to believe her, but damn, it was hard. We started dating and seeing each other at least once a week for the next 3.5 months. Our families were complete opposites, and although I resented some of their views and what I thought were too personal issues, they finally decided that I was probably harmless and relaxed their guard, not completely, but a little. I was happy, Regina was happy, and even Angela seemed happy to go with the flow, although she remained a little reserved in my presence. When I went to Regina's Sunday family dinners, it was fun, educational, and a little stressful at the same time, just because I was sure that all eyes were on me all the time. Relax, you're the new attraction of the month, Regina said. When my cousin Carla brought her boyfriend to church, no one left them alone until they knew all the details. Steve, women are naturally curious, unlike men, and they want to know all the juicy details. I felt a little better, barely. My family never went to church, but I was expected to accompany them every Sunday. Her family still wasn't entirely sure of me, and I wasn't entirely sure of them. This whole family affair was new and unfamiliar to me. When I said Regina was hot, I wasn't lying. I loved that I could look her straight in the eyes when I kissed her and that I could hug her tightly without the fear of breaking her. She was a fantastic kisser with a body I wanted to explore, but she wasn't ready to share just yet, at least not yet. After my hand was pushed away more than a few times, we had a serious conversation. I really like you, Steve. You know my past, so I hope you'll understand why I'm not ready for the next step yet. I know you're a little disappointed, she said, smiling slightly. But think about it, how awesome will it be when we actually do it? You could say I was blue with frustration. I told her I understood and would wait until she was ready, although not without some irritation. Then the day came when one of my hidden flaws showed itself in all its glory. Whether it was due to insecurity, jealousy, or simply not wanting anyone to touch my girlfriend, our next round of discussions deeply affected our relationship. The fact is that Regina loved to dance, not just loved to dance, but loved to dance. As I mentioned, I was no Fred Astaire, and although I liked to dance, I preferred slow dancing when she was in my arms. Because I kept saying no when she asked me to dance, I stupidly told her to go have fun when she asked if I minded if she danced with other guys. Huge mistake. Now, week after week, I was forced to watch from the sidelines as she danced with whoever invited her, Emilio, Marcos, Roberto, and others. Some were old friends, some were new, and the rest, well, who knows? I just think they wanted a piece of her attention. It was wearing me down. We had a little fight, especially after I told her that I didn't like the way she danced with everyone who asked her. I tried to explain that I didn't like what she was doing. I wanted her to sit with me and listen to music. She laughed and said that it was a dance club for a reason and that I shouldn't worry about her dancing with every guy. I let her know that her dismissive attitude did not amuse me. We left it alone that night, but I knew it wasn't over yet. We were on a double date with Jeremy and Cindy at one of our favorite clubs. Jeremy, like me, only lasted a couple of songs before the girls went off to have fun. Cindy returned after about half a dozen dances, but there was no sign of Regina. Half an hour later, when Regina was still not there, I went to look for her. She was dancing, if you could call it dancing, to salsa. She looked amazing, but that guy had his hands in places I couldn't get without a spanking. Even after 3 months, when that song ended, the next one started, and I never had a chance to intervene. I waited for the end of the song and interjected when the music ended. I was the most embarrassed guy on the floor. Okay, I'm not a good dancer, but Regina danced around me, emphasizing what I already knew, and now everyone else knew it. Then she did the unforgivable, she laughed at me. Whether it was the way I moved or if I just looked funny didn't matter. The final blow came when another friend of hers took her away to dance as the music started again, leaving me alone on the dance floor with everyone dancing around me. The only word I can use to describe my feelings at that moment was humiliated. I watched her move easily across the floor with her new partner. When I got back to our table, I was furious. My patience had run out. I downed 2 beers as I watched Regina move from one guy to the next. However, one guy in particular was paying too much attention to her on the dance floor. My irritation was growing, and the beer I was drinking was not helping me control it at all. "Steve, relax, it's just dancing," Cindy said, watching the top of my head explode. Seeing this guy kiss Regina on the lips as the music stopped, I almost made it to the dance floor before the music started again, but it didn't. She and her new partner disappeared somewhere in the crowd. "I don't need this," I muttered, returning to the table. I put down my beer, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the door. "Steve!" Cindy called out to me, but I didn't turn around. Jeremy followed me outside. "You know this will piss her off, right?" he said. "I see your point, and she may have really gone overboard tonight, but getting angry and walking away won't solve the problem. Besides, you're already half drunk and shouldn't be driving. Go back, calm down. At least take a taxi home. If I stay here any longer, she definitely won't like what I have to say when she finally decides to grace me with her presence. You can take her home unless she decides to go off with one of her many dance partners. I don't think anyone could convince me to stay." I felt like everyone in the club was laughing at me because of the way Regina acted and treated me. "She came with me, didn't she?" Drunk driving was absolutely stupid. As I staggered through the front door, my father looked at me and told me everything he thought about it. "If I even think you're driving drunk again, I'll call the police on you myself. I don't care if you kill yourself, I care about the poor guy you might take with you." I tried to explain why this happened, but he said he didn't care. "If you can't keep your girlfriend, it's your own fault." That's when the 5 beers I drank tonight got me into a lot of trouble. "What happened to you and Mom? Did she find someone better?" I knew as soon as I said it that I had crossed the line. I could think about this for years, it's just that I'd never been stupid enough to say it out loud before. I didn't see the impact, but I definitely felt it. "I feel like a sack of potatoes." "You don't know a damn thing, do you hear?" he shouted at me. "Your mother was a damn cheater and still is. I treated that woman like a queen, and she betrayed me time and time again. You're just as ungrateful as she is, and I want you to get your 5th place out of my house by next week. Can you hear me?" I heard, but it didn't reach me because I was too drunk and trying to clear my thoughts. My father left, leaving me lying on the kitchen floor. Life at that moment did not look rosy. When you're stuck, it's hard to listen to sound advice, even if you know it's the right thing to do. I found a small apartment close to work and took Wednesday off to move. My father didn't talk to me, but Regina, well, she didn't call either. She was probably as mad at me as I was at her about that Saturday night. Jeremy helped me move my things from my dad's house on Wednesday evening. Before leaving, I took my house and garage keys off my ring and left them on the kitchen counter. Now I really don't have a family. "Give him a couple of days, he'll come to his senses," Jeremy said. But I knew that this could be a real point of no return. When he didn't respond to any of my messages after 3 weeks, I almost resigned myself to it. After this, Regina and I had a serious fight over her behavior and how I perceived her lack of respect for me. That Saturday night, she finally told me to go to hell. Life really wasn't looking good at that point, and it was on the verge of getting worse. I was alone, and for the first time, I didn't have to answer to anyone other than myself and maybe my new boss. Cindy thought I was being a complete jerk to everyone when I told her to back off. Jeremy and I had our first fight in 20 years. He was upset that I had put him in a difficult position, and although he understood my feelings, he was in love with Cindy. I made the choice easier for him. I stopped calling him too. I started hanging out with a new group from work, a mix of women and men who love to party, especially on weekends. I forced myself to get on the dance floor, and by doing so, I think my skin became an inch thicker. I no longer cared what people thought about me on and off the dance floor, and perhaps for the first time in my life, I felt more confident. I saw her dance with many guys. She knew I was there because I caught her looking at me several times. I danced more than usual, especially when the slow songs were playing. We were playing a stupid game, and we both knew it. I just didn't know which of us would be the first to get to the next level. I didn't see her approach because my back was to the dance floor, but everyone else at our table did. "Steve, do you want to dance?" she asked without showing a hint of a smile or any warmth. Regina, didn't you humiliate me enough last time, or do you just want to show everyone how much better you are at dancing than me? I'm sure you can find much better partners. You've never had a problem with that before. You really are a jerk, you know, she said. And just for your information, it's not what you think. I could see her group of friends watching us, one guy in particular. Thanks for the invitation, but no thanks. I don't want your new boyfriend to think I'm invading his territory. I'm not sure what I saw in her eyes, but there was pure anger on her face as she turned and walked back to her friends. I was getting more and more tired of this whole club scene. I liked the music, but the crowds, the smoke, and the pressure I put on myself to be someone I wasn't made it less enjoyable. I watched him walk towards our table, but it wasn't unusual. It was the guy from Regina's table who glared at me. With the bar right behind me, I assumed he was heading there. He didn't look angry, he wasn't a thug. He didn't even look at me. Looking back, I should have been wary, but damn, it's a dance club. One of the last things I remember was him pulling something shiny out of his jacket pocket with his right hand. He didn't say a word when he approached me. He didn't plan to. The pain in my stomach was sharp and intense. Acting on instinct, I pushed him away and saw that he had a knife in his hand. I think at that moment I was in shock. Someone at my table screamed, and holding my insides in both hands, I fell to my knees, then collapsed face down on the dirty floor. I was told that the place had turned into complete chaos. My table threw bottles at the guy, not wanting him to come near me again. They saw him try to run away before a guard grabbed him. Never attempt to attack a 6 feet 6 inches, 350-pound security guard, even if you have a pocket knife, someone said. The guard almost tore his arm off. As for me, I lay on the floor for no more than 5 minutes before I was placed on a stretcher, carried out, and loaded into a waiting ambulance. I had no idea what happened because I lost consciousness. Even after I came to in the hospital, I was still not sure what had happened. The room was dark, and when I first opened my eyes, I thought I was going blind. As I began to focus, I was grateful until I felt pain. Then everything came back to me. At least I was alive. How the hell do they in the hospital know when someone is waking up? Magic. Within seconds, I had a nurse checking my vital signs and asking how I was feeling. I was stabbed, I said. How do you think I should feel? Some questions don't even deserve an answer. She said I was lucky and would have to stay in the hospital for a couple more days, but after that, I would probably be discharged. I wanted to know about the guy who decided to explore my stomach. She informed me that 2 police officers at my door would answer all my questions. These were the usual questions I saw on most cop shows. Do I know him? Have I seen him before? Did he tell me anything before he did this? And lastly, and most importantly, why? I think he was angry at me because of a fight with my ex-girlfriend. I gave him the bare-bones version, and all this because I danced like an awkward white boy. I'll have to take lessons when I get out of here, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. They didn't laugh and didn't see the humor in it, and neither did I. Your assailant is currently in custody, charged with assault with a deadly weapon. When we look at the facts, the charge may be upgraded to attempted murder. I like the word attempt. I finished my testimony, signed it, and they left, saying they would contact us. I must have fallen asleep again. The next time I woke up, the room was dark. You didn't have to go to such extremes to get me to talk to you, said a voice from the darkness. My father got up from the chair in the corner of the room and sat down on the chair next to my bed. I'm so sorry, I started to say before he stopped me. We'll talk later, when you leave here. I called your boss at home, he already knew about it. He told me to tell you not to worry about your job and just get better. The doctor said you'll be sick for a while, but nothing vital has been cut. You're damn lucky. You've lost a lot of blood. Luckily, a couple of your friends applied a wet compress to make sure you didn't bleed out before the paramedics arrived. I think you'll have to pick up a few dry cleaning bills and maybe buy someone a dress that was used for a puking incident. In any case, you're alive and well. Maybe next time you'll learn to keep your mouth shut and get your head out of your 5th place. How did you like the first part of our story today? In my opinion, it was very interesting, but at the same time it was an introductory one. What's your impression? Write in the comments. See you in the comments.